Okay, today's battlefield will be somewhere in France. It has roads coming in from several directions, a few farmhouses and some fields with high walls in one of the corners. Let's see what type of battle we're going to have. Clark will do the honors. He rolled a 5, which today we agreed will mean the cauldron scenario. Now in cauldron, the defender starts in the middle and the attacker comes in from various sides at random. The Germans have infantry, so they will be the defenders. After the setup, we find that the British are coming in with a heavy force from the bottom left, while the Germans have their infantry dug in all around the middle of the table. The objectives are in the center and at the top right corner of the table. The Germans will have a heck of a time trying to hold back this British onslaught, so let's see what they have. They currently have the infantry on the table, as well as the 231 8-rads, but they'll probably be working overtime to try to hold back the British armor until their armored forces get on the table. So let's see how they do on the first turn. The 8-rads start by going after the lighter British tanks. Now, this is early war, so their smaller guns and even their machine guns can do damage to these things, and they managed to score a lot of hits and even destroyed a couple tanks. The German priority air cover comes in and bombards the heavy tank company, taking out one of the rear tanks. So this is how it looks at the end of the German turn 1. They've taken out one of the heavier tanks with the air power, and a few of the smaller ones with the recon forces. Let's move on to the British first turn. Let's first take a look at what they have. The British have an entire regiment made up of 2 companies filled with cruisers and a handful of light Mk6Bs. There's also a rifle platoon that will be coming in as well. The Brits started with the larger armored company on the table, meaning the rest are in reserve. But on the first turn, the Brits managed to successfully roll for reserves, meaning they now have all their armor on the table. And the new armor is racing straight for the objective and should be able to run right over this infantry, which doesn't have a lot in the way of AT weapons. Their machine gun fire results in a lot of hits, but any hit has to be backed up not only by the infantry not passing their saving throw, but a firepower roll of a 6, which is done in one instance, causing the German player to pick up one of his infantry stands, and with that, the assault moves in. The German player rolls defensive fire, causing a bailout of one of the tanks, but the other 2 roll in. They're confident and trained, so they need 4s to hit, and they don't succeed at either roll. The Germans are charging in for retaliation. They manage to hit, causing a bail on one tank, and the British player does not roll his motivation, which destroys the second tank and causes the third to retreat. So now he sends in the second group of 3 tanks. The German player rolls defensive fire, and it results in 1 bailout, then 2 bailouts. That leaves 1 British tank still in the fight. He rolls and comes up short of what he needs to get a kill. Again, the infantry does not need to succeed at a motivation roll, but they need to pass tank terror. Again, they fail it, and again their company commander has them re-roll, and they succeed. They go in at the remaining tank. They roll to hit, and they do. The British tank rolls for its armor and saves. He then rolls to stay in the fight, and he succeeds. He has to, or his 2 friends are toast. So he fights back and kills another infantry stand. The Germans now roll their motivation, and with the help of their company commander they succeed, and countercharge again. They hit with a rifle machine gun team, and then attack with their anti-tank rifle and hit. The British armor rolls for his armor and fails. This means the others in that platoon are destroyed as well. The Germans have now destroyed 2 British tank platoons. This is disastrous for the British. They thought they would roll over them, but are now one big flaming pile of wreckage. That leaves 1 last tank platoon to assault. They have to roll for bog checks coming out of the field. And they make it. The defensive fire distributes hits across the tanks. The British player rolls his armor and succeeds each time, so this time he gets 2 rolls to do some damage because the third is too far away. One of the rolls succeeds, killing the German infantry team. The German player rolls his motivation and fails, but his company commander gets a re-roll and makes it, so the German infantry is coming back at the tanks. The Germans score a hit, and the British save with their armor. They successfully roll their motivation to stay in the fight, and roll around to engage with all their tanks. This time they roll with 3 dice and get 2 hits. The German player rolls and stays in the fight. His men come in at the British tanks, and he hits with the anti-tank rifle and a regular hit. The British player needs a 4 to save, makes it, and then a 2 to save, and makes it. Now he needs to roll his motivation to stay in the fight, and he fails. With no company commander to make him re-roll, he pulls back. So the end of the first British turn finally ends. The large tank force that was already on the table has moved forward, but their reserves, who just came on the table, are almost completely in flames. It has truly been an extraordinary turn for them, showing what infantry, backed up by a company commander, can do to armor in an assault, especially in the early war where armor was not so strong. Now let's see what the Germans do to the British on turn 2. At this point, we're going to jump to the end of each turn to show you the progress a little faster. The Germans tried to assault the one remaining cruiser, but were unable to do anything and fell back into the woods. The cruiser then scooted to the other side of the wreckage. Meanwhile, on the other side of the table, they managed to bail out the second in command. Now for the British second turn. They managed to kill off some of the infantry in the woods with the cruisers, while in the meantime the MKs pushed back the recon, but were not able to destroy this last one because even though the German player needed a 6 to save, he rolled 2 6s in a row. Let's see if that luck holds up during his third turn. During this turn, he reorganized his recon forces on the left. And on the right, he chose not to have his sole surviving anti-tank rifle run, but instead, he dashed to the edge of the woods, shot at the remaining cruiser, bailing it out. He assaulted it, destroying the tank, then ran back into the woods with his consolidation move. He deserves the Iron Cross for that one. The British will try to push forward and take the objective now on turn 3, and they do, surrounding the objective and finally taking out the pesky infantry. The MKs, meanwhile, are continuing to hit the recon hard and are pushing around the flank while the cruisers take positions around the objective. The Germans have until turn 6 to do something about this, and it's currently turn 4. They didn't manage to accomplish a lot, though. A bomber managed to bail out a British tank, and though they fired a lot of this MK on their flank, the British player rolled incredible saving throws. Now, during the British fourth turn, he consolidated his hold on the objective, and the infantry came running in to help defend it. The company commander, meanwhile, has run around to get flank shots on the remaining recon units, causing many of them to flee. The Germans now have only 2 turns left to take the objective back as he starts turn 5. It's looking very bleak for him, but during the turn, he finally got the reinforcements he had been waiting for, coming in directly behind the British company commander and taking him out immediately, and killing a couple of the MKs. It looks like they're back in the game. The British player will have to find a way to contend with the German heavy armor during his 5th turn. He has set up his cruisers to take out any German menace that approaches the tree line while the MKs machine gun the remaining infantry, possibly opening up a path to the second objective. The tanks on the left, meanwhile, are still contending with the one remaining recon vehicle and trying to figure out what they'll do to the large oncoming German tanks. Now for the fateful turn 6. The Germans have pushed forward and have made it close enough to contest the objective. They created a firing line next to the ford, taking some pot shots at long range. Only during their Sturm move did they go to within 4 inches of the objective, meaning they took a big risk. If they had not succeeded at their Sturm move, the British would have won this game. Instead, the British will have to figure out how to dislodge them from their position now during their 6th turn. They tried by sending the MKs around behind German tanks, firing through the smoke at long range, and at the ford, the cruisers made their own firing line and tried to shoot through the smoke there, succeeding in the destruction of one of the tank hunters and bailing out 2 others. It's a real struggle, and it all comes down to what happens at the ford. The Germans take their 7th turn and manage to bring in some more reserves, bringing in 2 more tank hunters from the top right corner. The turn resulted in the loss of one of the cruisers and one of the MKs, but the British are still in the fight and may yet be able to dislodge the Germans from their hold on the objective. So they have their 7th turn, and it isn't as effective as they had hoped. They pushed up slightly from the left flank and charged across the ford with their cruisers, which are able to fire at full firing capacity even when moving, because it's early war. But they only succeeded in bailing one of the tank hunters in the back and one of the German panzers in the center. The Germans have their 8th turn, and it's much as expected. The recon bailed the remaining MKs on the left, and in the center they destroyed all the cruisers that were trying to get across the ford. The tank hunters in the top right, meanwhile, destroyed the MKs that had been harassing them and the infantry. So there is little hope left for the British. Now for the British 8th turn. The only thing they have left is their infantry, which will try one last desperate attempt to dislodge the German tanks through an assault across the river. The German tanks are set up like a firing squad and are about to fire on them as they come through the trees. They only need 5 hits to pin down the assault and steal the victory from the British. And he got it. That was the only hope left for the British, and with their infantry pinned, there is nothing left to stop the German advance on the objective. So the British player concedes, and the game ends. So the game ends with a German victory. Now for the post-mortem. The tipping point for the game was clearly the first turn, when 3 British armoured assaults were repulsed by dug-in German infantry. That infantry would clearly deserve the Iron Cross if any of them had survived. Also, the German panzers deserve credit for coming in at the key moment and destroying the company commander and saving the day for their side at the last second. I hope you've enjoyed this battle report. Check out our website to see more.